Hello everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to my channel. This is Leah Marie. Um Today's video we are going to be discussing the life and legacy of Dr. King. So initially I had planned to record this video beforehand, but my schedule got all mixed up and I lost track of time. So it's being recorded today, the day that it's going to be uploaded. So forgive me on that. I'm still trying to sort out this YouTube schedule thing. However, nonetheless, here I am today. We're going to be talking about Dr. King. So I did a little research and I took some notes, and I have some handy dandy note cards here that I will be reading off of or using as reference to discuss his life and his legacy. So to start off, we are going to talk about the early years of Dr. King before he became this national hero and champion for civil rights. So to start off, Martin Luther King Jr., formerly known as Michael King Jr., was born on January 15th, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, to parents Michael, later Martin King Sr., and Alberta Williams King. Dr. King was the middle child of 3 kids. Middle child gang, I'm a middle child as well, so I can relate. His older sister was Willie Christine. His younger brother was Alfred. So both sides of King's family, they have Georgia roots. On his mother's side, his maternal grandfather, A.D. Williams, was the first pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. After a while, King's father, Michael or Martin Sr., took over as pastor after his grandfather, A.D., passed away in 1931. At the age of, 5, King was baptized and had adopted the name Martin after the famous German Protestant Reformation leader Martin Luther, and his father also took on the name as well. During his teenage years, Martin had attended Booker T. Washington High School, but he was so advanced and so smart for his class that he skipped several grades and attended Morehouse College at the age of 15. So you're talking about a high school sophomore attending college. That's how advanced he was in his education. King's family was deeply religious, and there were instances where King had questioned his faith and had rebelled against his calling by engaging in various rebellious activities. It wasn't until, during his later years at Morehouse that he had finally reconsidered his decision about joining his ministry and pursuing his calling, that he decided to attend Bible school. So we're going to discuss King's education and how he excelled academically during his school years. King had graduated from Morehouse in 1948 with a degree in sociology. Following his graduation from Morehouse, he attended seminary at Koser Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania. During his tenure at in seminary, he was named valedictorian of his class. He had earned a fellowship to pursue his graduate studies, and he was mentored by Morehouse College president Benjamin E. Mays, who also served as a guide in his spiritual development. Following seminary, he had pursued his doctorate at Boston University, and that is where he met Coretta Scott. at the New England Conservatory School, where she was studying music. King earned his PhD the following year, and by that time he was also wedded to Coretta. In their union, both Martin and Coretta had 4 lovely children: Yolanda, Martin Luther III, Dexter, and Bernice. At the time, in the mid-50s, King was the youngest pastor to head Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, at the age of 25. So 10 years prior, he was one of the youngest students to attend college. 10 years later, he became one of the youngest pastors at his time. That is pretty amazing for such a young man. And if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes so I could kind of keep track of what I'm saying about Dr. King to make sure everything is accurate and correct. So we're going to get right into his career as a civil rights leader. So King was kind of thrust into the spotlight following his assigned leadership of the Montgomery bus boycott, following the arrest of another civil rights icon, Rosa Parks, who had refused to give up her seat to a white man on a local bus. So the backstory behind that, initially there was another young woman by the name of Claudette Colvin, who had initially performed the demonstrative act of not giving up her seat to one of the white passengers. But, unfortunately she was too young, and at the time she was, with child, so they didn't want to cause a scandal that would misrepresent the civil rights movement. So they had used Rosa Parks initially as, an agent to perform that act of civil disobedience. So that's kind of the backstory behind that. And like I said, King became somewhat of a success, well, a national hero. And the boycott as a result became a success under his leadership. 2 years later, in 1957, King and several other leaders had established the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I hope I said that right. Otherwise known as the SCLC. And actually, that's really what really propelled him into the spotlight, because of that organization. Also around that time, he started to develop a more of a non-violent approach to his activism by adhering to the teachings of Gandhi and following a trip from India where he had met with Gandhi. So that's kind of how he developed his approach to achieving civil rights and performing activism. He also became involved in other various demonstrations across the South during his career. So now we're going to outline some of the speeches and writings that Dr. King has made or written during his lifetime. Start off, he had written letter from Birmingham jail following his arrest at a local demonstration in 1963. Backstory, well, side note, during one of my college courses, I had to read an excerpt from one of the clergymen, well, from the clergyman that had criticized King for involving young people in the, social justice movement, because in their minds, they were thinking that, the children would be put in harm's way. But King's letter kind of counteracted, their argument. And he had basically, argued that, achieving civil rights and fighting civil rights is part of God's will, and it's what a good Christian would do, essentially. And that's what it also means to be a good Christian, to fight for the poor, the unborn, the elderly, the naked, the hungry, the sick. That's kind of what Christianity is all about. It's all about taking action. Using love to take action. Or demonstrating love in action. That's what I should have said. That's all over the place, but forgive me. Another speech that he had made, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows it because people often use, quote, this speech, and they mostly take it out of context. His famous I Have a Dream speech from the March on Washington on August 28th, 1963. One of his most famous speeches. That demonstration drew a crowd of more than 200,000 people, and the whole purpose of that march was to advocate for jobs and freedoms and racial equality for all people. That's probably one of the most biggest important demonstrations in modern American history. Another one, this is a speech that I started to listen to a couple nights ago during my research process for this video, was "What is your life's blueprint?" This is a speech he made in October 26, 1967 at a local middle school. That's pretty monumental to, you know, impart some wisdom to the young people of his time. Another sermon, I should say, that King, because given that he was a pastor, he made sermons quite often during his tenure as pastor at his, you know, respective churches, is Unfulfilled Dreams. And I had finished listening to that speech while I was, you know, doing errands in the car earlier this morning. He made that March 3rd, 1968, a little over a month before his untimely death. This was a rare sermon that I believe was unreleased to the public, but listening to it, it was, you know, it was very profound, and he tied scripture with his in his speech very well to relate to his content. So, very powerful speech. The last speech that King gave, literally the night before his assassination, was April 3rd, 1968. I've been to the mountaintop, and folks say, those that listened and sources have said, that this is probably one of his most prophetic speeches because King knew that he was going to die, unfortunately. He had that feeling in his spirit that he may not be there with us. He wasn't going to be with us any longer to continue the fight for, you know, the struggle. But he had seen the promised land, and God had given him a glimpse of, you know, a vision what the future could probably be like, and most importantly, entail. Give me 1 second, my phone's about to die. Sorry about that, folks. I'm gonna plug up my phone here. There we go. Now we're back. Saved by the phone charger. Anyway, what I was saying was that King's final speech was eerily prophetic, and God had given him a vision, a spiritual vision of what the future would be like for America and society in general, pertaining to civil rights and liberties and equality. And I listened to that and about last week, and that speech, like I said, it definitely foretold the future. Probably one of the most chilling speeches that he ever gave. So, on a happier note, we're going to highlight King's different awards and achievements that he received as a civil rights pioneer. To kick it off, King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In 64, he also received other recognitions such as Who's Who in America, Time Magazine's Most Outstanding Personalities of the Year in 57, one NAACP Spingarn Medal, Times Magazine's Man of the Year in 63, John Dewey Award from the United Federation of Teachers, and the John F. Kennedy Award from the Catholic Interracial Council of Chicago during that same year that King had been awarded the Peace Prize. Other awards include the National Newspaper Publishers Russ Warm Award in 57, the Second Annual Achievement Award from the Guardian Association of the Police Department of New York in 58. And that's pretty much all the awards that he had received in his lifetime. That was pretty outstanding. There was one TikTok video that gave us little known facts about Dr. King. And another award that it received, this is based off of Taylor Cassidy's video. I'll probably link it in the description. She had mentioned that King had won a Grammy in 71 for one of his speeches. I'm not sure which speech it was, but King won a Grammy. And I think when I was looking online for more information about awards he'd won, he had also won another one in 2012, I believe. Yeah, it's pretty cool what King had accomplished. We're also going to highlight some demonstrations that King had participated during his lifetime. As I mentioned earlier in the video, he participated in the March on Washington in 63, where he gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. He also participated in the March to Montgomery, which is around the time that Bloody Sunday had happened. That march was was headed by John Lewis, who later became a congressman for Georgia. And throughout his career, King, towards the end of his career, he has started to kind of shift his approach to a more radical approach. And he started to advocate for anti-war efforts against the Vietnam War and economic independence for blacks. Hence, the sanitation workers strike in Tennessee sometime later. Now we're about to get into the part where King's life reaches an unfortunate, tragic end. On April 4th, 1968, King was assassinated by James Earl Ray at the Lorraine Motel. Story time. So, some years ago when I was in high school, my cousin and my aunt and I, we had went on a special civil rights trip across the South. And I think we had went to Tennessee and we had visited, the Lorraine Motel, which essentially turned into a museum. And that's where we saw the site where King was unfortunately killed. Regarding his assassin, James Earl Ray, he was sentenced to 99 years in prison. Unfortunately, he had passed on April 23rd in 98, which was over 30 years after the assassination of King, so he couldn't complete his sentence. So, after King was killed, a lot of cities across America went into an uproar because King was, another black messianic figure who was taken down by the government. And I know eventually his family had sued the government for playing a role in his passing. And as far as his assassin, James Earl Ray, goes, he was possibly used as a scapegoat in his assassination. Other than that, King had been a target, especially during the later half of his career by the FBI. And they had wires, being put on him and being tapped in, in his private conversations. So King, he the moment he stepped into the spotlight as a civil rights figure, that's when, he was a target. And it just kind of goes to show that, every black figure that becomes some sort of like a messiah to our people, they get taken out, especially when they start to change the rhetoric towards economic independence and freedom. That's when the powers that be are like, oh no, they have to go. And unfortunately, King was another one of those heroes who was taken out too soon. But in spite of his tragic death, we want to highlight how his legacy has flourished at this time. So all in all, King was a visionary. He had a dream that the world would be a better place and everyone would come together and put aside our differences regardless of our skin tones. He basically changed the entire scope of civil rights forever through his acts of service, through his acts of love and nonviolence. Because of these efforts, he was given a national holiday, which was signed into legislation by then President Ronald Reagan in 1983. And celebrations didn't really start to take into effect until probably 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. But although King is regarded a hero, I feel as though his legacy is being taken for granted and it's being, ostracized in a way. It's been watered down because there's so many people on the other side of, the political aisle. They take his quotes out of context to fit their own personal agendas and interests. And as a result, his contributions are definitely overlooked because they try to just reduce King to this kind-hearted, loving preacher who wanted everyone to get along. That's not who King was. King was a complex figure. King was so much more than just, a kind-hearted preacher, as he was, but King, he was so much more than that, and the fact that they just reduced him to just that shows that America didn't really care much for King. They didn't really show King that high regard while he was living, and they still don't give him that high regard while he's passed on. And it's just saddening. And I'm here to tell you that Dr. King, he was a hero. He was a legit hero. He may have had his flaws because at the end of the day, he was human. However, King did so much, or tried to do so much for his people to get us in the right direction. And one thing I realized about King when it came to his approach about civil rights, initially, during the first half of his civil rights career, his approach, his rhetoric kind of catered towards integration. However, during the second half of his career, towards his assassination, that's when he started to change his approach, and that's when he started to kind of cater towards Black liberation and economic freedom and pride in our people, and to, focus more on how to enrich the Black community. He wasn't liberal, he was more of a radical, but he changed his approach to kind of cater towards the needs of our people. Because I don't know exactly what quote he had said initially, but to paraphrase it, he had, compared integration as of walking into a burning house, meaning that he had some regrets about, his integration rhetoric in all of that being entailed. And the way that I see it, was that in order for us to really have racial unity, we have to really work within our communities to better ourselves, because our people, the Black community, I feel like the reason why we're so divided right now is because we have been conditioned for many centuries to cater to the needs of people outside of our community. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that we have to kind of enrich ourselves and uplift ourselves. But the moment that we try, and we've done that, we've attempted to do that many times throughout history, through Tulsa, through it was either Rosewood. We tried to build up communities to help sustain ourselves, but the minute that we do that, those folks outside of our community, they become intimidated and they just take us out and destroy our progress. Then the main one's telling to support ourselves up by our bootstraps. It shows that they're somewhat intimidated by us trying to uplift our communities and become more upwardly mobile. And that's the thing that King initially had learned and had initially attempted to do during his lifetime. But all in all, Dr. King will be remembered as a legend. Dr. King will be remembered as someone who tried to be a good person, who tried to serve others, who tried to make the world a better place. One thing I will say, last thing, is that these holidays, this holiday, Dr. King holiday. I feel as though, you know, the government had used it to kind of overcompensate, and they used it to cover up the fact that they didn't really care much for King. They used that holiday as a means to cover up the fact that they despised King. But that's another video for another day. The point of this video is that we want to honor King's life and legacy, and we want to make sure that King did not die in vain for civil rights, for equality, for justice for our people, and for others that are oppressed. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Sorry for the excessive rambling. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and also turn on your notification bell for when I upload more videos. If you haven't watched my previous video on my New Year's resolutions and goals for 2022, I will also link it in the description box below. So that's all the time I have for today. I will see you guys next time in the next video.